Hi, this is Nikki. I've been playing around with some guides and visuals for both my interview coaching as well as my career coaching practice. And so this is kind of off the cuff today, but it's about 5 years in the making. And I just want to walk people through what it would be like to work with me as a career coach. A lot of this you can find on your own. You can find it on Google, and I hope you do. I really hope that people take advantage of someone like myself when they're getting stuck and they just can't get there on their own. I'm not a guru. I don't have any magic answers, but I definitely think in some certain key areas I can be really helpful. So I want to walk you through what it might look like to do career coaching with me. One of the biggest hurdles a lot of my clients face is I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, whether they are 16 and just starting to kind of research that process, or they're 55 and they're super burnt out on the field they've been in for 30 years, or a plethora of reasons they're returning to work after all the kids are in school. There's all sorts of things that come up here, and it tends to be the holdup for a lot of people from figuring out what's next for them. Because the first thing I tell them is, well, your resume, your materials, your networking, everything you do needs to tie back to what are your search goals. And if we have that kind of overall goal too wide, you don't have as targeted of marketing materials, of a networking plan, even your overall value proposition you talk about in interviews, you will come across like your goals scattered, not really sure of what you're looking for. And so it really is my hope to help people narrow in on that. So let's go through this visual so that you can picture what it would be like to work with me on this process. And by no means is this black and white. Does it only follow this process? It's just simply meant to be some type of a tool so that we can get some benchmark data for things you know, areas you need to do a little homework on, and then using someone like myself or another career coach. I'm here to provide some ideas. I'm here to challenge you when it's appropriate. And then I'm also just someone that can hold you accountable, but more so, I'm not biased. Like, I'm not here trying to prevent you from relocating. I'm not your spouse who wants you, home more or earning more or anything like that. I'm a very non-partial source that can help you bounce some ideas around. So, some places we could start. I love to start with strengths and weaknesses. Let's just get them out there. Let's be real. Let's talk about the things you really like. Let's talk about the things you really don't like in a job setting. Those can be helpful. They tell us a lot and they give us some starting points. I also really want to dive into what do you love, value, and appreciate in a work sense? This varies for everybody. Equally, what do you hate? What makes you cringe, or what makes you super frustrated? Those can be some really awesome telling points for us in terms of what type of a job you may be looking for, or it might help you overcome some barriers that you've ignored, thinking, oh, I went to school for this, so thus this is what I need to do. But if we get to talking and find out, that's interesting, you really don't like a lot of the things of that field, let's talk about that. Those are really helpful points to go over. I also love to dive into what or who do you want to help? What sort of things are you passionate about? What sort of things drive you? And equally, are there certain things you want to avoid? A joke I hear a lot lately is, I don't want to work with people. Or reversely, I hear a lot of people saying, I went to school to work with people and now I'm just sitting behind a computer all day. Like, I want to be more hands-on. So those are also some really good things to consider. Next, what are your hobbies or interests? Personally, I'm a big fan of it's great to have hobbies as hobbies. Oftentimes, when people think they need to love their job, they need to love it like their hobby. I mean, maybe it's great when it works out that way. I love what I do, but my hobbies have nothing to do with this. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having a career and something I'm really interested in, but equally escaping it through my hobbies and interests and using my career and job to help pay for those things. Sometimes people have more intersection. Other times they're completely separate. This varies for everyone. And so it's something we should really discuss to see where you fall on that spectrum. Also, what are your no-goes? Are there things that you just absolutely cannot tolerate? You don't want anything to do with them from a personal standpoint? Sometimes we start to see some of these things that folks really don't like weaving in and intersecting with their jobs. And so that could definitely be causing some of their frustration. So it's a good thing to just keep in mind. Here's the big one. And this I've definitely learned over 5 years of doing this. We really, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm technically a certified life coach, but I don't really focus on that beyond the career and job aspect of things through my coaching practice. However, if you have some personal development work that needs to occur, such as therapy or life coaching, we need to be cognizant of that. I don't want to get into, your entire backstory if it's not necessary, but at least from a high level, discussing, have there been some workplace traumas? Do you have boundary issues? Are there patterns that need to change? If there are things like that, such as you never say no, or you're always the first person to raise your hand for something, and then yet you find yourself getting overworked and overwhelmed and quitting out of stress and things like that, or maybe you've just always taken and taken and taken and you've been okay with no pay raise for 10 years. I don't know what it may be, but we do need to address it, because if we don't have you work on some of those things, we can figure out what's next for you, what your dream job is. But if you keep not having boundaries, or if you keep kind of, gravitating towards certain personality types in a manager that are not a good fit for you, you're just going to end up back in the same place. And so I at least want us to have that conversation and be cognizant of what some of those things may be for you. And then for the process to work, I'd like, if you're okay with it, to ask you some challenging and yet still friendly and safe questions based on that information to help you determine any action plans for those areas. If there is some trauma there that needs to be addressed, one of your action items may be, I'm actually going to look into a therapist and take some of this stuff seriously and as part of the process. And I recognize I need to work on that as much as I do figuring out what's next for me. Or maybe there's boundary issues, or maybe it's mindset. Maybe these are all common ones I see with a lot of my clients. I don't have confidence. I don't feel positive in myself. Well, no matter how much work you do to figure out the dream job, if we don't work on that as well, and by we, I mean working with me to identify it, and then working together to come up with an action plan through other resources, through other subject matter experts, you'll just keep ending up stuck or unhappy. And so I definitely want that to be a part of the process. And it's a conversation we need to have if it applies to you. If it doesn't, you're just kind of like, I just still don't know what I like to do, but I don't really have anything that's like holding that up. That's okay. We'll keep talking about that. So from there, just overall, what are some functional areas you're interested in? Maybe you love marketing. Maybe you love working with kids. Just casting that net wide and looking for some preliminary interest can be really helpful. From there, it's time before we get too far in this process. This is where the practical, like former HR in me comes out. I sometimes see coaches go through this whole process, and then at the end, clients are like, yeah, so my stuff all came back that I basically like love to work with food and need to make $12 an hour. I can't afford to live on that. So I do want to have some of those practical conversations off the get-go in terms of what are some basic compensation and benefits preferences. And then reversely, what concessions, if any, are you willing to make throughout this process? I have had clients have to take a significant pay cut to leave a very highly lucrative field to make a career pivot. After 6 months of looking and just really not finding anything and being willing to make some of those concessions, it opened up some doors for them that otherwise may not have been there. I'm not a fan of that unless we have to, but we need to be realistic on what your skill sets are, what the marketplace offers, and more so, what does your competition have? Because if there's a lot of competition out there and employers can easily fill things, we do need to have that conversation on what does more training look like? What does a pivot look like for you if it applies? So it's just good to keep those things in mind before, again, you get too far in the process and get all excited and realize, oh shoot, I can't actually make that move because of these hurdles. So we at least kind of want to get some ideas in mind on that. Do you qualify for these preferences? Just based on the research that you've done so far, we'll work together to figure out what the marketplace data looks like for some of your functional areas, for some of your pay requirements, and we will help educate you on the action steps to take to get there, and we can work on those together as well. From there, let's discuss, what are you already qualified for? What do you have training or past experience in? And also, what are you not qualified for now, or at least yet? Oftentimes clients will come with, well, this is what I'd love to do someday, but I'm not qualified for that. Okay, well, let's talk through what would it look like to get there, which also ties into what sort of steps or concessions or investment are you willing to do to get there. These are all conversations that we can have together, and hopefully it will start to bring a little clarity. That's all still assuming you have some ideas on these topics. If you're starting from, I have no idea, you could be listening to me right now thinking, well, that's great. That's why I'm in this mess. That's why I reached out. How will this stuff help me? Okay, so now it's time to really discuss what are some ideal roles, what are some non-ideal roles that we have not already discussed, and if you're still stuck, why? What is going on that after all of these different conversations and starting to narrow in on what type of pay or benefits you need or strengths you have, what's really going on that we haven't gotten a little bit more of a sense of that? And it's okay. It's all part of the process. This is not a linear process. Nobody starts and stops at the same point. And a lot of times you might make a couple of steps forward and then have to kind of go back and re-examine things. So that's why working with someone like myself can be helpful. So from there, if you're still stuck, we need to talk about what steps do you need to take because you are still stuck. This will look different for everybody. And it is my job to help you figure out what those steps are and what they look like and how you can realistically go about doing it. So I'm here to help for that. So if that's kind of scary, that's why it can be really helpful to work with a coach. From there, it would be nice to do, a session, maybe two, to really dive into, what did you learn? What are you starting to see? What are you starting to get excited about? What scares you? Sometimes at this point in the process, we have to go right back up here to some of the development work. Sometimes we get that far into the process where we uncover, oh, there is a mindset issue, or there's a lack of confidence, or there's some other things going on that we can work on if you're willing and able and ready, that can help with some of the things that may have been causing you to be stuck. I am not the magic expert for all things, but the nice thing is I've been in business long enough that I do have the right resources to help connect you with if it's necessary, and we can work on an action plan towards that. So we would keep working on that and discussing what you've learned, what you're starting to see, what other action steps you need to take until you are ready to narrow it down, which is the really exciting part of the process. This is usually where light bulbs start to go off and clients start to get really excited. And that is where the resume writer and LinkedIn profile writer and all of those good things come into play by working with someone like me who's a one-stop shop. So once we start to really target your ideal roles, one of the first things I would challenge you to do is to find 5 people doing those roles. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I have a very thorough networking and job search guide for the point in time when you know what some of the dream roles look like. And from there, sometimes clients get so excited, they kind of forget that the process isn't over yet. In fact, it's just one small part of the process to identify what is your dream job goal. Because we have materials, we need to make sure you have a strong resume that's marketed and targeted towards that new job goal. We want to discuss the cover letter and your value added. I've had a lot of clients say recently that experts out there are saying you don't need a cover letter, you don't have to worry about this. It's true and it's false all at the same time. Some jobs don't even allow you to attach a cover letter. Some require it. Some folks read them, some don't. I always challenge A good one can only help you. If it's bad, if it's just reciting your past history, all of those things, you're right. Why waste your time on it? However, the type of cover letter template that I would recommend is one that will really get after what value will you add for that employer. And the truth of the matter is, every time you apply to a job, that is an exercise that you need to do. So by drafting it into a cover letter and letting the employer know that, it's a huge part of your overall sales effort for that position that will only help you later in the process through negotiation. So those are some things that we can really dig into if we work together. But I just want to kind of mention, I'm a fan of one that's been done really well. And I also think you can use it throughout the process, whether when interviewing, networking, etc. So don't underestimate the value of a piece of paper that talks about the value you will add for a specific, unique individual position. And also LinkedIn's fantastic. So we would want to talk about a strong profile and utilizing it for your networking as well as research. I've mentioned networking a lot. It's a part of the career coaching process. It's a part of the job search process. I'm a fan of using it to fact find, building your community and overall rapport, and learning how to sell your value. My guide can help with that. I'm here to help with that. But it's definitely a huge part of the process. And a lot of folks don't like it, but I promise you it pays off. And even if you're still like, I don't know, I'd like to get away without that, one of the best ways to make sure you're getting into a positive situation with a great boss, with a great organization, really is word of mouth. And so that's something to keep in mind if you need it as a motivator for networking. Some folks do, some just already love to do it. Some would prefer to do anything but that. But I'm here to promise you it really does pay off. And so trust the process. I can help you with it as well. Interview coaching. I am in the process of becoming a certified interview coach. I've done interviewing for a long time, both for myself, for switching jobs, helping hiring managers, as well as staff I hired myself. One of the things we'll do if we partner together is to really hone in on what your value proposition is for the types of roles you're applying to. And then we'll discuss some overall themes and then dig into specific examples using like the STAR or PAR approach. And then additionally, we'll want to discuss your special sauce that you bring to the table. A lot of folks can also leave out this part of the process. They're either, I find, stuck on what do I want to do next? And then once they figure that out, they're kind of off and doing their thing, or they're really stuck on the resume and they forget about the interview component. And it really, like, if you do nothing else, I think everyone needs to do interview coaching, because once you get to the stage of getting the interview, you just really can't afford to make a mistake there. And so I think if you do nothing else and do everything else, do it yourself, use Google, use AI, use all the tools, I really firmly believe that if you are on the job hunt, practice makes perfect. And by getting some interview coaching, it can really help your offer success rate go up tremendously, as well as your compensation, by really learning how to sell your value to an employer. Comp research becomes extremely important at this part of the process. We want to get a clear understanding of what your market value is based on your background, based on the positions, as well as what does your return on compensation look like to the employer, and being realistic about this. I'm here to help with that. So that's definitely something we'd want to keep in mind. Something that's often missing, and I've learned through experience, is your 3 Ps: patience, perseverance, and positivity. It's really easy to lose patience in this process. It's a frustrating, slow process. It's easy to give up at times and think, I'll just stay where I am. It's easier. I get paid well. I may not love it, but what am I going to do? Learning to have that perseverance and the resiliency that comes through that will pay off in the long run. And so we want to have some really candid conversations on what your work will look like to stay patient, to keep persevering, and to stay positive, because those matter. If you start complaining about the process endlessly, if you start telling anyone who will listen how terrible it is, how unfair it is, all the things, you are not helping yourself. We all need those times to vent. That's why job search support groups and things like that can be a very appropriate community to do that with. It's nice to surround yourself with other people who are going through similar things. But at the end of the day, you need to mind your 3 Ps, and we need to talk about what that looks like for you, because all of us are different. And all of us struggle in different areas of that. So that's something I would definitely want to address through your plan. And then from there, we should be starting to head into offers and counter offers and things like that. We can discuss some non-pay points such as remote work or leaving on time to get your kids from daycare, all of those sort of things, PTO. Through that, discussing negotiating what it would look like to counter, what types of steps you'd want to make, and being very realistic and very helpful about those is always good. There's a lot of negotiating advice out there. A lot of it's awesome. Some of it's dangerous. Some of it can lead people down a path of making ridiculous counters that are just not realistic at all. And yes, offers can be taken away. I'm talking, an entry-level job and countering back like a 65% pay difference could get that offer rescinded from you if they have 300 other applicants willing to do it. All of that gets into what's your market value, what's your return on comp, and really starting to understand what a win-win negotiation would look like, while still making sure that you're advocating for yourself and getting what you deserve to be paid. So from there, reading the document and the fine print, making sure we get things in writing that were promised to us, and ultimately, congratulations, you are done. Hopefully this was helpful. If this inspires anything for any of you, please, I hope you can use some of these points throughout your process. If this resonates with you and you think, gosh, I think this could be really helpful for me, I would strongly suggest setting up a free consult. These are the types of things we would do in our coaching together. And I have some similar exercises for interview coaching as well as materials. But ultimately, we really do want to have you feel confident about what's next for you and what some of those dream roles look like. And this process can help you get there. So this is Nikki again. Thank you so much for your time today, and reach out if you have any questions. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.